In this video, I'm going to show you the exact systems that I use to run my six-figure coaching business. And these are also the exact systems that I help other coaches with so they can grow their businesses as well. All right, so starting with leads. Lead generation is just how you consistently bring in the right people into your business. And this matters a lot more than most coaches realize. Because if the wrong people are coming in, or if not enough people are coming in, then nothing else in your business is going to work. Once you actually have a legitimate system, you know where your leads are coming from, you know why they're coming in, and you know how to consistently generate more of them. But most coaches don't actually have a lead generation system. They're just posting content and hoping that something works, and that's exactly why their businesses get stuck or they just start to feel inconsistent. Because most people think that lead generation is just about posting more content. You hear this all the time. People say just post more content, just post more content. But lead generation actually starts way before that. Lead generation starts with your offer and who that offer is for. Because your content is just going to be a reflection of these two things. Your offer determines what you're actually helping people with, and your ICP just determines who it is that you're speaking to. So if either of these two things are off, then yeah, your content might get views, but it won't bring in people who actually convert. And this is one of the biggest issues that I see. Coaches are putting out content consistently, but they're either attracting the wrong people or people who aren't ready to buy. And then they just assume that they need more volume, right? They just need to post more. But most of the time, it's not a problem with volume, it's a problem with the alignment. So to have solid lead gen, your offer, your ICP, and your content all needs to be aligned. If these three things are working together, everything else in the business is going to be way easier. Your content is going to resonate more, your leads are going to be higher quality, and your sales calls are just going to feel a lot smoother. And this is where most coaches go wrong. They either go way too broad or way too narrow. Now, if you're too broad, you're trying to talk to everyone, so no one actually feels like you're speaking directly to them. Your content is going to end up feeling generic, and it's not going to create any real intent. And on top of that, if you go too broad, you're going to end up weakening your brand, which can really hurt you in the long run. Now, on the other side, if you go too narrow, you put yourself in a position where there just isn't enough volume to grow. So now you're stuck relying on a small group of people or taking on clients that you don't even really want just to keep the business moving. So there really has to be a balance between the two. And this is where understanding ICP and TAM really starts to become important. So your TAM is going to be your total addressable market. So this is everyone who could become your client at some point. And your ICP is your ideal customer profile. This is going to be a smaller group of people who are ready right now. And a mistake I see all the time is coaches leaning too far into one or the other. So the reality is your ICP lives inside of your TAM, and your content needs to reflect that. Because inside of your lead generation system, your content needs to do two things at the same time. It needs to attract people from your TAM, and then it has to move the right people into your ICP. If you can do that, that is how you create both volume and conversion. Volume and conversion. These are the two things that you need. So you need to get enough volume to have good lead flow, but you also need to be getting enough conversions to actually collect cash. The point is, you're not just trying to attract people, you're guiding them through a process, right? So you're nurturing them along in order to help them convert. And whenever you get this dialed in, lead generation stops feeling random. Like you stop feeling like, okay, sometimes I get leads, sometimes I don't. And it starts to become a predictable process. You'll eventually start to realize that, okay, certain types of content are going to bring people in, and then other types of content are going to move them closer to buying. And I've seen this play out both ways. I've worked with coaches who were posting nothing but broad content, and they were getting a ton of views, but they were getting low quality leads. And as soon as we introduced more conversion focused content, their lead quality went up, their objections went down, and they were able to charge a lot more money. Now, I've also worked with coaches on the opposite side, where their content was like very specific and very bottom of funnel, but they didn't have enough volume coming in. So once we widened their content slightly, they were able to consistently book calls while still keeping the same good lead quality. So both sides of this really does matter. And that's why it has to be part of an actual system and not just random posting. Now, once the foundation is set, that's when content actually starts to work the way that it's supposed to. Your content should be doing most of the work before the conversation even happens. Your content should be building belief, it should be positioning you as the authority, and it should be filtering out all the wrong people that you don't actually want to talk to. So by the time someone reaches out to you, they already understand how you think, they already see the problem, and they already see you as someone that can help them. And when that's happening consistently, you start getting inbound leads where people are reaching out to you directly. And the reason why this is important is because it gives you way more leverage and way more authority because you're not the one chasing them, they're the one reaching out to you. This isn't to say that, inbound leads are automatically going to be perfect, but they're just a lot easier to deal with. And if you can position yourself where people are coming to you, it's going to give you a lot more leverage. Now, with that said, unless you're doing crazy numbers, you're likely going to need to do some form of outbound as well, especially in the beginning. Because if you try to rely on inbound leads alone and you aren't getting really good views, your numbers just aren't going to be consistent. Now, when it comes to outbound, keep in mind that you should not be cold messaging random people. I see people do this sometimes, but I really don't recommend it because yes, you can get leads that way. And yes, you can even get sales, but it takes so much more work and so much more volume that you're honestly just better off spending that time on making more content. Whenever it comes to outbound, you should only be starting conversations with people who have already shown some level of interest. So this can be people who followed you or just did something to show you that they're at least somewhat interested in your content. That way, instead of trying to convince random strangers, you're just continuing a conversation with someone who's at least already aware of you. And there's ways to do this at scale as long as you have the right automations in place. You just want to make sure that it still feels natural. So when you zoom out and look at this as a whole, your lead generation system is actually going to be pretty simple. You have your inputs, which are your offer, your ICP, and your content, which all need to be aligned. You have your content strategy, which is going to be bringing in people from your TAM and then moving them into your ICP. And then you're going to have your lead flow, which is going to be inbound and outbound. And when you get this whole thing right, it makes everything else in the business so much easier. Now, once your lead generation system is bringing in the right people, the question is, what actually happens to those people once they enter your funnel? And this is where your sales system comes in. Now, sales is just the process of turning interest into clients. But just like with lead generation, this shouldn't be some random thing that just happens in your business. And this is where a lot of coaches mess up because most coaches don't actually have a sales system. They just get someone in the DMs and then they book a call and then they try to figure out everything live on the call. And sometimes it works, but it's going to be inconsistent and it's going to be really hard to scale. Because what they end up doing is getting on calls with people who aren't fully bought in, they're not fully qualified, and they aren't really clear on what they're even getting. And then the coaches try to fix all of that on the call, and that's when it starts to feel like selling or like you're trying to convince someone. And the thing is, a lot of people think that that's normal, right? A lot of people have the complete wrong idea when it comes to sales. Sales should never feel like convincing. It should never ever feel like you're trying to convince someone. If it feels like convincing, that means that something went wrong earlier on in the process. Because in a proper sales system, the sale doesn't start on the call, it starts before the call even happens. Your content should already be building beliefs, it should be positioning you as the authority, and it should be showing people how you think. Then your conversations should just be continuing that process. So by the time someone gets on a call, they already understand the value, they already trust you, and they already see themselves as someone who could work with you. So there's different ways people like to have their sales system, but really your sales system needs to do three main things. The first thing is it needs to shift beliefs. This is something that's going to happen way before the call even takes place. So from the beginning, your content should already be shaping how someone thinks. It should help them understand that they have a problem. It should help them understand why that problem exists. And it should help show them why what they're doing isn't currently working. So your content should be pre-handling objections before they ever even come up. Whenever someone is getting on a call and they're saying things like, I don't have time, or I can't afford this, or this might not work for me for XYZ, or I'm sure you heard this one, I need to think about it. All of these things should have already been addressed. If people are getting on your calls and they're saying things like this is the reason why. Because you can't close someone who doesn't believe that they have a real problem or doesn't believe that you have a solution that can help them. So this is honestly where most of the selling actually happens. It doesn't happen on the call. It happens before the call even gets scheduled. Now, the second part is qualification. Again, this happens in your conversations before the call. So people should already be pre-qualified before they get on the call. Your DMs are not just for getting to know your followers or just talking to your fans. They're for qualifying leads that you actually plan on speaking to later on. So you should be trying to understand where someone is at. You should be trying to understand what it is that they want. You should be trying to figure out what they've tried. And you should be trying to figure out what's currently stopping them. Because the truth is, not everyone who reaches out to you or not everyone that you reach out to is going to be a good fit. And if you try to force someone who isn't a good fit into your program, it's going to create problems for both of you. So it's better to just get this out of the way before that even happens. So instead of just reacting to or responding to whatever people say in your DMs, you need to be consciously guiding the conversation. Pretty much, you're going to be the one that's helping them get clear on their situation and whether or not it actually makes sense to get on a call, right? Because they don't know. You have to be the one to show them. And whenever this is done right, by the time someone gets on a call, they're already partially bought in, especially if you handle things right with your content earlier on. Now, the third part is going to be the decision. Now, this is pretty much just the call itself, right? And if belief and qualification have been handled properly, this actually becomes the easiest part of the entire process. Because now you're not trying to convince anyone, you're just walking them through their situation, confirming whatever it is that's going on, and then helping them decide if it's the right move. And the way I like to think about it is almost like you're a doctor, right? Someone comes to you with a problem, you diagnose it, and if you have a solution, then you present the solution to them. But you're not actually forcing them to take it, right? You're just showing them what the right move is. And if they want to go for it, then that's totally up to them. And when you take this approach, it completely changes the dynamic of a sales call because you're not chasing, you're not forcing, you're just guiding the decision. It makes the process so much easier. And I see a lot of people dreading sales calls, but if you do the other steps right, then the sales call really isn't that hard. Now, there are always going to be leads that have some objections, but the goal here is really just to minimize them as much as possible. In reality, most objections are created earlier in the process, and they're always going to come from either a lack of clarity, a lack of belief, or a lack of trust. If these things aren't handled through your content or in the nurturing process, then that's when they're going to show up on the call. Now, it does help to have the right sales skills to overcome objections when they do come up on sales calls because most online coaches have never had proper sales training, but it's always going to be better to handle them before they can even come up in the first place. So if your calls aren't closing people consistently, or it feels like you're having to sell people every single time, then it's usually not that you don't have value to provide. It's usually that you just don't have the right system. Either your content isn't building belief, your nurture process isn't setting things up properly, or your qualification isn't filtering people. Sometimes it can be sales, don't get me wrong, but usually it comes down to one of these earlier steps. Now, the third thing you really need to understand when it comes to scaling a business is the fulfillment. So once you have a system that brings in the right people consistently, and a system that actually converts them into clients, the next question is, what happens after people actually pay you? Well, in reality, fulfillment can be one of the worst parts of your business. This can really make or break a business whether or not people realize it. Not because people can't get clients, but because the back end of their business isn't built to support growth, especially if that growth happens fast. Now, the goal of fulfillment is to get consistent results in a way that you can sustainably scale. This is what actually gets your clients their dream outcome, and it's what determines whether or not your business can scale. But most coaches don't treat it like a system, and instead they have a rough outline of how they do things, but it usually involves taking way too much of their own time, which ironically can end up hurting the client results. And the problem is, if every single new client requires more and more of your time, then eventually you're going to hit a ceiling. And that's when coaches start to feel burned out. And that's also when client results start to go down, which almost creates a reinforcing cycle of problems. So just like lead generation and just like sales, your fulfillment needs to be a system. So it needs to be a structured process that consistently gets clients results without requiring more and more of your time. Now, fulfillment can vary a little bit, but there's a few key things that always make up a strong fulfillment system. The first thing is going to be onboarding. As soon as someone joins, they should know exactly what's going on. So they should know what the process looks like, what they're working towards, and what's expected of them. Because if that's not clear from the beginning, then people will start to second guess their decision. And if they start to second guess their decision, they won't fully commit, they won't follow the process properly, and they're more likely to drop off early. So onboarding isn't just about getting them access to the program. It's about setting the tone, it's about building confidence, and it's about making sure they understand exactly how things are going to work. Now, the second part of fulfillment is having a clear roadmap. This is what gives both you and the clients a clean structure. Your clients should always know what step they're currently on. They should always know what they need to be focusing on, and they should also know what's going to come next. Because when people don't have that clarity, they start to feel lost. They start to question whether they're doing the right things. And if that happens, it can start to hurt their progress or their overall results. But on the other hand, whenever there's a nice, clear roadmap, everything becomes simpler because they stay focused, they follow the process, and they're much more likely to get the results that they want, which not only helps them, but it also helps you. And from your side, this makes delivery much more consistent because now you're not reinventing the process for every new client, and instead you're just guiding them through something that's already been built out beforehand. Now, the third part of fulfillment is getting a quick win. And this is something that a lot of coaches overlook. I charge a lot of money to help coaches scale their business. So my number one goal once they onboard is to try to help them start making that money back as soon as possible. And the same should go for other offers. Like, if a client doesn't get some kind of result early on, they don't fully buy into the process. And if they don't fully buy into the process, then they're not going to follow it properly. So early wins are important, not just for results, but also just for the overall momentum. This is going to help build trust. It's going to increase the engagement in whatever kind of program you're running, and it's going to make the client feel like they made the right decision. And once you kind of set that standard and you get that momentum going, everything else becomes much easier. It makes your fulfillment easier. And again, it just gets them better results, which makes everyone happier. Now, this can look different for different offers and different structures depending on how you're doing things, but you need to find a way to do a quick win. I promise you, this is worth it. All right, so moving on, the next part of fulfillment is actually having systems and SOPs. This is what really makes your business scalable. There should be a repeatable way for clients to move through your program and get the same results, or at least very close to the same results. So that can be templates, that can be SOPs, or even just guidelines that you follow whenever it comes to actually delivering your service. Regardless of how it looks, the idea here is to just have some consistency. So instead of you having to do more and more work as the business grows, instead you just build a system that does more of the work for you. And that is what actually allows you to scale without burning out. This is going to help you because it makes your life easier and less stressful and makes it easier to make more money month over month. And it's also going to help your clients because they're able to step into a repeatable process that gets them their desired outcome. Now, if you want help building out these systems so you can consistently grow your business, click the link in the description and we'll see if it's a good fit. Either way, I appreciate you watching and I'll see you in the next one.